World War I was the first conflict to see aerial combat as a new battleground. German aces like Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, terrorized the skies over Europe. By 1916, the British and French air forces needed all the help they could get. Exactly 100 years ago, a group of American volunteers, known as the Valiant 38, answered that call.
This is where American air power began, 1916. That Americans volunteered in 1916 to fly missions against the Germans. And it was called the Lafayette Escadrille and the Lafayette Flying Corps. On this very day, April 20th, 1916, 100 years ago, the Lafayette Flying Corps, the Lafayette Escadrille was formed.
The squadron was named after the famous Frenchman, Marquis de Lafayette, whose contributions to the Revolutionary War were critical for American independence. His name became a symbol for the American and French alliance. Pilots of the Lafayette Escadrille flew the French Nieuport airframe, adorned with the squadron's insignia, a Sioux warrior.
If you think back at those days, it was the days of innovation. Aviation was still a big question mark. The French government clearly understood the need to be at the right place at the right time with air power, and they thought correctly about how to do it. So it was a great relationship to begin. Even though we invented the airplane, they invented air power in terms of how to do it in a time of war.
The Lafayette Escadrille saw their first major action just weeks after deployment, with Kiffin Yates Rockwell becoming the first American pilot with an enemy kill.
On the 18th of May, we had the first engagement where an American aviator scored the first victory. A very short, quick burst, 4 rounds, and the enemy crew was killed, and it scored the first victory.
But the brutal fighting of the war would soon take the lives of several American volunteers. On June 23rd, the Escadrille suffered its first fatality when Victor Chapman was shot down over Douaumont. Rockwell himself was later killed in September. The names of these men lost in the battle, as well as those that survived, are commemorated at the Lafayette Escadrille Memorial outside Paris, France.
They lost 68 men. About 40 or so are buried right here.
Lieutenant Colonel Nick Rutgers pays tribute to the names at the Lafayette Escadrille Memorial. While he's currently serving as an F-15 pilot in the Oregon National Guard, this monument has an even deeper meaning to him.
I'm fortunate to be a descendant of one of the members, the original 38 members of the Lafayette Escadrille. My great-grandfather was James Norman Hall.
Born in Iowa, James Norman Hall worked as a writer while studying for his master's at Harvard. In 1914, World War I broke out while Hall was vacationing in England. Posing as a Canadian, he enlisted in the British Army and fought in the Battle of Loos before he was discharged when his true nationality was discovered. But his sense of adventure would take him back to the fight, this time with the Lafayette Escadrille. During his time in French aviation, Hall was awarded with the Croix de Guerre, with 5 palms, and the Médaille Militaire. Hall would finish out the war fighting with the newly formed American Air Corps. This spirit of service was a common trait within the men of the Lafayette Escadrille.
Say at the very beginning, it was in the defense of freedom. It wasn't one nation's freedom, it was freedom in general. Yes, in fact, it was 68 lives lost, but it was an investment in freedom, and it secured the foundation of who we are. A few of those names are well known. A handful are very well known as aviators, but they were just brave people who volunteered. They were innovators, they were pioneers, and to know that they've been honored 100 years later, to have the recognition drawn for such a great act and a great contribution.
So as we remember the men of the Valiant 38 and Lafayette Escadrille 100 years later, they remain a symbol of dedication to the ideals of liberty, brotherhood, and equality, or liberté, fraternité, and égalité. Staff Sergeant John Archiquette, Marnes-la-Coquette, France.